Welcome back yet again, gang, and welcome to part 4 of our Chapter 6 lecture series, this one entitled The Limits of Liberty. The focus question for this section is, how did the Revolution diminish the freedoms of both Loyalists and Native Americans? As we have previously discussed, Loyalists during the American Revolution were those that retained their allegiance to the British Crown, and this comprised roughly 20 to 25% of the population of the colonies at the time. In many respects, actually, the American Revolution can be seen as a civil war among Americans, particularly in that southern theater of the war, which saw pro-British and pro-patriot militias clashing rather frequently. During the Revolution, there was intense suppression of pro-British sentiment, particularly by groups such as the Sons of Liberty, who attempted to police the colonies and reduce the British sentiment and increase pro-patriot sentiment at the time. Many Loyalists had their land confiscated from them and sold off. Some were denied the right to vote, and many were forced into exile at the conclusion of the conflict. In many respects as well, the Revolution can be seen as a borderlands conflict. At the conclusion of the Revolution, approximately 60,000 Loyalists were banished or immigrated voluntarily to Canada, and this had an extreme impact on Canada. An entire new province was created to accommodate these British settlers in what had previously been primarily French Canada. Even though Canada had been taken over by the British at the conclusion of the 7 Years' War, there still weren't very many British settlers, or English-speaking settlers for that matter, in Canada at the time. Most were still relics of the French occupation of that territory. This influx of British settlers radically transformed the Canadian social and political milieu. It actually inspired a Canadian rebellion in the 19th century, and American Loyalist exiles were viewed by many as Canadian founding fathers, and this also helped to establish Canada, or Canadian identity, as it were, in juxtaposition with American or United States identity. It also drastically transformed the U.S.-Canada border. It went from being a colonial line that was easily crossed to an international border subject to all the rules and regulations associated with such borders. For Native Americans, the American victory in the American Revolution meant a loss of freedom and a dispossession of land. There was an effort by the Mohawk chieftain known as Joseph Brant to create an Indian confederacy between Canada and the United States that could serve as an independent Native American republic. But these efforts were thwarted to a large degree because the British had completely abandoned their Indian allies in the Treaty of Paris that ceded all of that land west of the Appalachians and east of the Mississippi to the young United States. And because Americans greatly desired access to that land, a huge influx of settlers began to pour into the region, directly challenging Native American claims to that land. And because of the loss of their British allies in the region, the Native Americans did not have any strong central force that could stand in opposition to American encroachment in their territories. For Native Americans, freedom meant independence and possession of their own land. And over time, Native Americans began to use the language of liberty to defend themselves and their lands from further American encroachments. That concludes part 4 of our Chapter 6 lecture series. As always, study hard, and I'll see you soon.